NBA draft lottery is tonight, kicking off Combine Week in Chicago. Jazz, Wizards, Hornets, the best chances to grab that number one pick, all with a 14% chance to get the chance to draft Cooper Flagg, who is by far our number one ranked prospect at CBSSports.com. The top 14 featuring 13 college one and dones and no international prospects. All these guys went to college, which is pretty rare for what we've seen recently. We are going to go through all of these guys with our two guys, Kyle Boone and Adam Finklestein. And we know that Flagg is number one, but Fink, where would you rank him if you had to take the last 10 years? You know, you got Wemby, you got Zion, even though he hasn't quite turned out in the NBA. Where would he rank among prospects over the last 10?
You know, I think he's in the top 5. I think he's somewhere ahead of Zion, but behind Wemby, just because Wemby's just physical measurements were so unprecedented. But Cooper has a legitimate chance to evolve into a star player in the NBA, and I don't say that lightly. The other thing that's really exciting about him is even his floor, so to speak, or the worst case scenario, still looks like the second best player on an NBA championship caliber team. So there's really not a whole lot of bust potential here. And that is really rare, because when you look back at this draft, for all the stars that have come out of it, you get a decent amount of misses too, even at the very top of the draft. And there is very little chance that Cooper Flagg will be a miss. It's the rare combination of a high floor and a potentially high ceiling. One of the reasons why so many teams are excited about the possibilities tonight. Could be a franchise-altering moment for whoever gets the number one pick later on this evening.
Yeah, and I'll go a little bit bolder here with Fink. I think he's the second best prospect since Anthony Davis. I would put him just behind Victor Wembanyama. I'd put him ahead of Anthony Davis. I'd put him ahead of Zion Williamson. And for all the reasons that Fink mentioned, right? He's a great defensive prospect. He's a defensive playmaker who served as a defensive anchor for a Duke team that won 35 games. They were top 5 in offensive and defensive efficiency, with him leading the way in points, in rebounds, in block shots, in steals, and assists. I mean, he does everything. And so there's a reason there is a lot of anticipation leading up into tonight's lottery, because I think it's true that it will change the trajectory of whichever franchise is lucky enough to get the lottery balls at number one and pick number one in this year's draft.
And picks 2 and 3 could be both Rutgers players. Those are our second and third ranked players in our rankings. Dylan Harper, 2. Ace Bailey, 3. Kyle, why is Harper looked at by many as maybe the more sure thing at this point?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. More of a sure thing in that he's a two-way guard who can pass the ball, facilitate, and be a scorer. There's in the NBA, I think there's just such a need for guys who fit that type of skill set right now. He can play on the ball. He can play off the ball. He's developed as a shooter. He's got really good size. He's got good pedigree. His dad was Ron Harper, who played in the NBA for a long time. So I think there's a confidence level, right, with Dylan Harper that you know he's going to be a very good, productive player for the long time. His pacing, his skill level, all of that I think just translates at a really high level. And so, for me, I think that's the difference in picking, Dylan Harper or over an Ace Bailey, over VJ Edgecombe, Trey Johnson, some other guys who we have in the top 5 of our prospect rankings, but just ranked beneath Dylan Harper, who I think is the clear number 2 in this year's draft class.
Now you start to look at tiers, maybe where things drop off a little bit. It feels like Cooper Flagg is 1, then there's a little drop off, and then maybe is there one here before VJ Edgecombe, Adam, who comes in at number 4?
Well, I think the tier break depends on your perspective. Some people would say VJ's in the same tier as Ace Bailey. I think Ace Bailey is in the same tier as Dylan Harper. But the thing with VJ is, first of all, he's probably the best athlete in the class. Second of all, there is no denying or doubting his competitive character. I mean, this guy is a warrior in every way, shape, or form. And 3, he's just continued to get better. In high school, he was really an undersized but athletic wing. And then this year at Baylor, we saw the progression of his guard skills. He was taking more on-ball reps. He was shooting the ball much more consistently, especially before that ankle injury in late January. Then the other thing, too, is he's a two-way player. Now, he's got some strides he's got to make on the defensive end, and that's something that people aren't really talking about. He's getting credited for being one of the best defenders in this class. I think that's fair on the ball, but off the ball, he's got some things to clean up, and that's normal for a young player. But competitive character, athleticism, and if you believe the guard skills are going to keep coming in the future, then it's easy to see how you could have him in that same tier with someone like Ace Bailey.
We'll round out the top 5 of our consensus prospect rankings at CBSSports.com with Trey Johnson, who also played his college ball in the state of Texas for Texas. 1 season, but Kyle really elevated his scoring in the second half of the season.
Yeah, he did. And this is a guy who was ranked as a 5-star recruit coming into college to play at Texas, a really highly touted recruit, and really developed throughout the season as more than just a scorer. I think coming into his college career, people expected he would be an assassin. He'd be someone who is unafraid to take shots. And he did that at Texas. He actually led all freshmen in college basketball in scoring in terms of points per game, but he also developed on the ball as well, passing in terms of his playmaking. And I think there's a lot to like here with Trey Johnson. You look at the numbers here, had 89 3-pointers made. As a true freshman, that was first among all Division I freshmen, 121 free throws, so he got to line pretty consistently. There's a lot of diversity and versatility in terms of what he can bring to the table on offense. There's a lot to like. Some people have him as high as number 3 in this class, maybe ahead of Ace Bailey. We have him at number 5 right now, but someone who I think is really starting to grow on NBA teams as they dig into what he did as a true freshman at Texas is really impressive.
All right, just missing the top 5 is a player who was one of the best players in the NCAA tournament, really showed us a lot at Duke, opposite Cooper Flagg. Con Kneppel, number 6. Adam, what is he besides just an elite shooter?
Well, he's a guy who can be a terrific blend player and then can take some reps as a primary creator. That's what we saw at Duke in the ACC tournament when Cooper Flagg went down. We got a glimpse of what a rookie season from Con Kneppel could be like if he were the 1A option. Of course, he was not that for the vast majority of the year, and you saw someone who was perfectly content to play in the flow because he's got good size and strength, although I do not expect him to measure at the 6'8" that Duke had him listed at. As you said, Chris, he shoots the ball really well, but beyond that, he just knows how to play. He's got a high feel for the game. He understands spacing. He doesn't catch and hold the ball. He keeps it moving, whether it's a dribble, pass, or shot. So he's going to be able to play with other good players. And when you translate to the NBA and you have to adapt to sometimes not being the best player on your team for the first time, Con Kneppel is going to be one of the players who has an easier adjustment than most because he did it this year at Duke and he thrived in that role.
A lot of these guys, 5 stars just a year ago, but at where we're at right now, we're starting to hit some guys that might have been overlooked going into college. Oklahoma's Jeremiah Fears comes in here, and Kyle, you call him kind of a high-risk, high-reward kind of guy. Wasn't a top 30 recruit by any metric a year ago.
Yeah, that's right. It's an interesting case here with Jeremiah Fears. I have him probably a little bit higher than most would rank him. I will freely admit that. I have him at number 7 here, and there's a lot to like here with Jeremiah Fears, but there's also a lot to be concerned with. You have to do a lot of projecting. He's a very young prospect. He reclassified up, so realistically, we should be talking about someone who just finished his senior prom and is graduating as a high school senior, coming into this class. But at OU was really productive. One of the most athletic finishers around the basket, can get into the paint. Really, really electric with the ball in his hands. Some questions about his defense, some questions about the shot, how those are going to translate and develop over the years. I think we'll determine whether or not he is worthy of a top 10 pick. But if you can do some squinting with Jeremiah Fears, if you can see the ball handling, the athleticism with the way that he gets to the paint, if all that stuff can translate, develop some of the other portions of his game, I really like him. I think he has star potential in this class. There's not a lot to be had outside the top 5. That's why I'm taking a pick here. Number 7, I think the chance that he becomes a star in the future is certainly worth betting on in this class.
Going through our top prospects here ahead of tonight's NBA draft lottery and then the combine in Chicago, where our two guys are going to be headed a little bit later on today and tomorrow. When we come back, we will hit another son of a former NBA star. It's not just Dylan Harper. How about Jace Richardson, the son of Jason, who won a couple of dunk contests back in the day? NBA draft lottery tonight, so we are going through our top-ranked prospects at CBSSports.com with Kyle Boone and Adam Finklestein here on HQ Spotlight. We've gone through the top 7. The real theme here this year, Kyle, is no international prospects in the top 10. A bunch of one-and-dones like Jace Richardson, the son of Jason Richardson, coming in at number 8. How does he compare to his high-flying dad?
Well, he doesn't have the athletic pop that his pop has, but he certainly has the basketball IQ of his father. And I think that's what is most exciting about Jace Richardson, the one-and-done freshman from Michigan State. Earlier this season, Tom Izzo actually did an interview with CBS Sports' Matt Norlander, breaking down a little bit of Jace Richardson's game and said, like, basically, I don't think this guy should be allowed to go to Vegas at any point. He has a photographic memory, and they did some film review where they reviewed Jace Richardson during the game, and some of the things that he remembered just shocked Tom Izzo, who's a Hall of Fame coach. And so I think he thinks the game at a really high level. He plays the game at a really high level, really good shooter, combo playmaker who can do a lot of different things. His offensive game, I think, will translate at a really high level. I think he'll have a productive NBA career just like his pops did.
Let's go to Kasparas Yakachunas, who might not be the most explosive out there, Adam. And his three-point numbers were a little bit concerning at Illinois, under 32%. How does he make up for that to become a top 10 prospect?
Well, he's a polarizing prospect because he's not an elite athlete. So you're really banking on the positional size, first of all, the skill set in the field for the game. And yet, as you said, Chris, he's got that lower three-point percentage. And when you look back at his statistical history, this year was not an anomaly. I mean, we've seen comparable numbers at different spots. And then he had a really high turnover rate as well. So the teams that like him like the overlap of the size, the creativity, the ability to read pick and roll, and the shooting potential. They're not really too caught up on this shooting number. A lot like Liam McNeely at UConn, they believe the shooting is going to be better than we saw in college basketball. The teams that don't like him are worried about someone who doesn't have elite separation and how he might compensate when there's inconsistencies in the shot and the decision making. So this is someone whose range, I think, could be pretty high, not only tonight, but in the 6 weeks leading up to draft night as well.
All right, we've hit every position, I believe, except center. But at number 10, we get our first, and it's Cam Malawach, Kyle.
Yeah, that's right. One and done Duke star. Surprise, surprise, another Dookie inside the top 10. Malawach, an interesting one. 7'2" with a 7'6" wingspan. One and done prospect from the Blue Devils. And, you know, I think there's a lot to like here. Someone who picked up basketball late in his career, really flourished on the FIBA circuit and popped onto the radar as a five-star prospect. His movement skills at his size, I think, is the selling point here with Malawach. Of course, the last time we saw him was in the NCAA tournament in the Final Four. He played 22 minutes, grabbed 0 rebounds, kind of left a sour taste in the mouths of some scouts and some talent evaluators. But, you know, someone who I think can be an above-the-rim finisher as a lob threat, who we saw at Duke was one of the most prolific lob finishers in college basketball, and a really good shot blocker as well. I think there's a really high floor for him. Come on, Malawach coming in as a projected lottery pick in this year's class.
And speaking of the tournament, one of the lasting images, probably a shot we're going to see for a while, is from another center who comes in at number 11. It's Maryland's Derek Queen. He's not nearly as tall as Malawach. How do you see him, Adam, at 6'10"?
Well, he's more in that Alperen Sengun type role because he's not especially tall or long or athletic or quick, but he's super skilled. He has some of the best hands in the draft. And I don't mean he can just catch tough passes. It helps him to be an elite positional rebounder. It helps him as a ball handler. It helps him as a passer, and it gives him shooting potential. And those things put together are why people are intrigued, because whatever he may lack in terms of athleticism, he compensates for with playmaking. I mean, you can play off him like Maryland did in the low post or the high post. They ran a lot of their stuff at the elbows. You're seeing more and more of that type of action in the NBA. Quite frankly, this is a prospect that 10 years ago, I think people would have questioned how he fits in the NBA. But in the modern game where you have, listen, the Joker comparisons are not fair, but that's like, think poor man's JV version, you know, the wide-bodied big who isn't a elite athlete, but who can really handle pass and create mismatch problems, again, which is why the Alperen Sengun comparison is probably the most fair. But let's face it, even that one is ambitious because Sengun is such a good player. But it gives you an idea of what type of prospect Derek Queen is.
All right, let's move to number 12. It's another college one and done. All 12 of these have been so far. It's Liam McNeely out of UConn. Kyle, I was reading one of your mock drafts, and you said that maybe playing out of position a little bit in college could help him in the NBA. Why is that?
Yeah, at UConn, you know, he entered a situation where the Huskies really did not have a true playmaking, facilitating lead guard like they've had in recent years in winning back-to-back national championships. And, you know, I think it will end up serving Liam McNeely very well. He ended up playing a lot on the ball as a creator. That was not necessarily his natural role coming into college, but I think he showed a lot doing so as a playmaker, someone who can really create and get downhill as a finisher. I think in the NBA, we're going to see him more playing off the ball, creating value with his defense, with his shooting, and just with his overall energy and effort. That's not really his game, what he did at UConn, but I think there's still a lot to like here in terms of his versatility. You know, he's someone who has been a winner at every spot. He played at UConn. He played at Montverde on a, you know, really loaded Montverde team that included Cooper Flagg. So, you know, someone who I think can be a little bit of a chameleon, fit a number of different roles in the NBA.
We're looking at the top 14 players. It could be lottery picks in this year's NBA draft with the lottery tonight. We'll find out who gets to pick number 1 in Cooper Flagg. But we're down here at 13. It's a man with 3 names, and the first one that played 2 years of college ball. Adam, how about Colin Murray Boyles?
Well, here's what you need to know. He's got really long arms. He's very physical and strong. He's also an extremely smart player. Now, what he is not is a floor spacer. And so some people say he might be a small ball 5. And similar to what I said with Queen, that is not an archetype that has a ton of traction in the NBA. But a lot of scouts think he is good enough at what he does so that it'll be able to translate and he could be the exception to the rule. The NBA game, like the college game, has gotten much more physical. We've seen the pendulum kind of swing in the way it's officiated. That's going to bode well for Murray Boyles because he's so physical. He can guard bigger guys inside, but he can also think and execute, make plays off short rolls and dribble handoffs. So I do think he's going to be a very productive NBA player.
And to number 14, it's Yegor Demin, who, Kyle, at times, we saw him ranked top 5, definitely top 10 a lot of the year out of BYU, and you would have him higher than this. Why?
Yeah, I would. You know, this is someone who, yeah, I think, as you mentioned here, the perception around Yegor Demin has changed a little bit in the last couple of months. There's some holes in his game where he's not the best shooter. I think there's some questions about how his defensive versatility will translate at the NBA level. But, you know, when I'm evaluating prospects, I'm looking for a skill that's going to translate. I think he's the best passer in this class, Chris. And I think that's a foundation you can build around. Someone who can be a true lead guard for you at the next level because of his passing ability, because of his vision. I think some of the other parts of his game will end up rounding out. He's shown himself to be really committed as a hard worker, developing some of the finer points of his game. So I really like Demin as a lottery prospect in this class who has room to grow here over the next 6 months leading into the NBA draft.
Kyle Boone, Adam Finklestein, thanks for the time. Safe travels to Chicago for the lottery tonight. And then the draft combine, which really ramps up tomorrow and later on this week as you look at our top 14. Interesting to note, no international players here in the top 14. The last time we didn't have multiple international players taken in the top 10 was 11 years ago. So this is a unique draft.